Combining text with other elements is really starting to get into interface design in general. I mean, there's never really going to be just a single line of text. There's always going to be text plus something else. It might be text plus other text, or text plus an image, text plus a border, and then times infinity basically for any screen design. So let's just take a look at a handful of examples that explore combining text with other elements, and then we'll dive into kind of a live process of kind of how to balance all of that while looking at the bigger picture and zooming into the details. So let's take a look. So first of all, we're going to look at Stripe.com. It's a great example of just really good design. And the thing I want to point out here is the combination of all of these elements right in here. So we're looking at this little kind of kicker title thing, the big title, the paragraph, and then these buttons. And the thing I want to point out is probably the two most important things when you're combining text elements is the variety. So you got small, big, medium, and then kind of, medium, large-ish. It's just nice variety. It's not all the same. It's not, it kind of all complements each other. And the other thing here is going to be the negative space. Nice use of negative space. See, they've got an even space between this, and then maybe half that for right in here. The leading is nice. Didn't mean to take a screenshot. The leading is nice, and there's just nice variety. So variety and negative space are going to be the two biggest factors that you want to think about when you're combining multiple text paths, multiple titles, subtitles, paragraph, variety, and negative space. All right, so now we're going to look at an example from one of my older projects. This is a project called BabySense, which was a baby product comparison shopping site. And kind of the same thing I want to point out here is variety and negative space. So we've got our 4 fonts here. We've got 1, 2, 3, actually probably only three sizes in this main area. So if you look, we've got 32 points, 14, 14, 14, and 14. This is Museo Sans, kind of a rounded font that I chose just because this is a baby site, and basically when you have a baby, you want every edge to be rounded. So I thought it made sense to have that type of typeface. But again, it's not quite as airy and breathable as the Stripe site. But again, this is an application. This is more of an e-commerce application. So we have things a little bit tighter in here, but again, it's variety and negative space. Like, look at all the space in here. Even in these tiles here, we have a little bit of variety. We've got the title, the price, the description, but you have to be careful not to use too much variety. You only want, 3 or 4 different styles based on the information at hand. And, in these cases, we want to see the big title for what it actually is. We obviously want to know what the price is. And since we're comparison shopping, we want to know how many stores has this available, because the detail screen would show the different stores that you could purchase the product. But again, I'm just trying to emphasize variety and negative space. All right, back to Stripe.com. This is their checkout, kind of their checkout template that you can have access to through Stripe. Links to all of this down below, but I just want to point out, again, variety. We've got the smaller, since this is a checkout page, you're probably more interested in the price as your main kind of largest piece of information versus what the name of the article is. So they've made a decision to make this price a little bit larger. But again, look at the generous use of negative space. Lots of space right in here, lots of space in here, and over here. The one critique I have, and they changed this a lot, so it could be different by the time you're watching this video, but some of the spacing in here it feels like it could use a little bit of work. So if I open up this inspector and I go to this label here, this form field group, what feels tight to me is this space right in here. And, this is just a gut change. It's not necessarily something that I feel like has to absolutely be done. But if we just add 4 pixels of padding on the bottom of that. And another thing that I like to do, I do appreciate that this is all left aligned, but whenever I'm pairing text with a rounded edge like this, it's kind of the similar when you pair a circle to a square. The circle a lot of times should be a little bit larger because the perceived weight is smaller with a circle if it's the exact same size as the square. And we'll get more into that in the layout and alignment sections, but I do want to point that out here. I'm going to move this over to the left 4 pixels as well. And so now even though that our text is not aligned, we can still kind of consider this entire thing as a block, as an object. And in this particular instance, Pay with Card is the parent of email. So I'm fine with moving this in a little bit. A lot of times I might even move this all the way over to be fully left aligned with the input field. And again, this is a matter of preference in a lot of cases. Let me go back to that. There we go, right there. So it looks like they probably have about 12. Yeah, so if we zoom in here, you can see that's what it looks like if our input text is aligned with our labels. But if we zoom out, that might feel a little bit there might be too much negative space kind of blobbing in and out through here. It might be too much. So if we leave that at 4, you can see just changing it from 4 pixels to 12 pixels. It's a very small change. It kind of makes a big difference when you're paying attention to those little details, when you're pairing text with other elements, like how much of a negative space is going to make a difference. And to me, this feels a little bit better. So if I open that up and I go back and forth between these two, that's just 4 pixels of padding on the bottom of those labels and then 4 pixels to the left. And you can see it's just a very subtle change. But those little things, paying attention to that at such a granular level, and then you zoom out, it kind of gives it a little bit more of a balance. Okay, another thing I want to point out in addition to combining text with things like border radius on input fields, I want to talk just quickly about combining text with little accents like hash marks or lines or just something to give it some decoration, whether it is an interactive link or an icon, just something to give it a little more interest, to jazz it up a bit or to make it pop, as some people would like to say. And to do that, I want to look at dribbble.com/Rally Interactive, based in Utah. Ben and his team, they are absolute masters at layout and typography and design, and it's always really good to find people that are really nailing it to kind of take inspiration from. So what I want to do is scroll down here and check out, let's go with this one here, Snowbird Lodging Detail. And I'm just going to open up one of these attachments and maybe zoom in on this one that's a little bit larger. All right. Scroll down here. Okay, so in both of these examples, you can see that Ben is using this like M dash on the end of the title. And it's not really necessarily for any particular important reason other than it just kind of has like a fun little accent. So relax at the Cliff Spa, M dash. And notice also this 01 hanging out way out here. So he's titling these sections with, and it's an accent, but it's also typography. It's very small and it's got lots of negative space, and it's just something to kind of add a little bit of balance, a little bit more visual interest. This is something that Ben and Rally do a lot. Just find those little details that they can pop in to give things balance and a little bit more interest. Even these, I know this is a little pixelated, but you can kind of get the feel anyway. These are probably not even links. Actually, they might be because it says book a room. But he could have just put a list of buttons with, something a little more boring, but he has these little accents kind of off to the left. And when you roll over them, it's very likely that they might kind of hover in. So you can just kind of see that this little M dash, these little kind of matches the style of these arrows. And then going back to this larger one, you can see this a little bit better. These arrows, this M dash, or actually this is probably not even an M dash. M dash is typically only as long as an actual M character. So he might actually be drawing these little rectangles by hand and popping them in there. So just trying to find those little things that you can add in, like a little hash mark under the title or a little arrow. Sometimes it's easy to overdo those things, but if you want to kind of bump up your text usage, especially in marketing sites and sometimes even in applications, you can add those little features. As long as it has generous negative space and there's variety and it's kind of well balanced, it can really add a lot to your designs. All right, so the last example here that I want to show is this kind of section in here. This is kind of like your feed where you've got calls and text messages and lots of things going on. And this is in Framer, which I don't use that often, but it is kind of nice to be able to create little prototypes like this where you have the native kind of bouncy scrolling and whatnot, and you can add little things. But I don't want to cover all of that just right now. I just want to mostly point out the text information right here. So we've got our avatar here, and this thing is 60 by 60. So if I just do a quick hold of the Option key, you can see I'm going 16 pixels from the left edge and then 16 pixels from this title here. And so my title is 18 points. My little timestamp is 14 points. And this thing is 16 points. And the reason those ended up being those sizes is because the little kind of missed call, answered call, and this text message, that's going to be text that you're going to read a lot more often. So I wanted that to be just a little bit larger, but it's not quite as important as the title. So as I'm combining this title with this text, I'm using a little bit bolder of a font, 18, and then I'm using 16 here. And you can see I've used 4 points of space between the two, which gives just enough negative space while still kind of balancing against this avatar over here. Now, if I had the avatar by itself and I wanted to just have someone's name, this avatar and this title, if it was on a completely different page, that might not work as well because it's only the title with this larger avatar. So I might end up wanting to go like 40 by 40 with something like that if it was only the name. And you could go even smaller. It's just a matter of like what's going on the page. You kind of have to zoom out and look at every element all together before you can make those smaller details. So it's about zooming out and looking at variety, paying attention to the negative space, and making your decisions based on all of the balance kind of. So it's all about holding each of these elements kind of together in balance and harmony as you make individual decisions. So key takeaways here: combining text with other pieces of text, combining text with other elements. You want to pay attention to your overall balance at a high level. You can't just make individual decisions and say, okay, my titles always need to be 20 point. It's always going to be dependent on other elements and how it can kind of balance out. You're going to want to create that balance at a low level with the tiny, like 4 pixel padding, increments of 4 pixels or 16 pixels or whatever kind of makes sense for your design. You're going to want to use those little increments as your kind of foundation for creating that balance. Then you zoom out and see how it plays with every other individual element on the screen. And you're going to want to be generous with your negative space. On the message example, you can see that there's not a ton of negative space in between each one of these, but there's at least, close to 30 pixels on top and bottom. And each one of these has its own negative space. So between avatar to avatar, we've got close to 48 pixels of negative space. And if this was a lot tighter, if these were all kind of crammed together, then it wouldn't work as well because it's starting to get too dense. And there are times when you can make super dense informational layouts, but in this case, I wanted it to feel a little bit more breathable, a little bit more lighthearted. So as you add space, it just kind of gives you more room to breathe. So don't forget to give your elements breathing room and generous use of negative space when you are kind of laying things out. And another just quick little tidbit is, if you're laying things out vertically, make sure you're paying attention to this space in between. Are you going to use 2 points or 6 points or 8, and then zoom out and see how that feels. And if they're more closely related to each other, then tighten it up a little bit. If it's not related at all, it needs a lot more space. And then if you're aligning text with other text horizontally, you want to make sure that you're going with a baseline alignment. So if I scoot this over, you can see that the baseline of these text strings here is line, and the baseline is going to be the bottom of these lowercase letters, and not including the descender here. If I try to grab this and center it vertically, that would be an option, but it's just not going to work quite as well. And I know it's kind of hard to see this, but a lot of times you might have a larger, let's see, make this a little bit larger. So if I've got a larger typeface here, and you might be tempted to kind of center that vertically. Well, if I can do it. As this gets larger, it's just gonna feel, it just feels a little bit like it's just not quite gonna work. Like it just feels a little bit wrong. It's always gonna be a little bit nicer to have these baselines lined up. Creates a little bit more balance. Let me put that back in place. I don't have my quick keys set up in Framer because it was a little bit harder to do that. But as you make those little tiny decisions and then you zoom out, it's just going to create a nice balance for every single piece that's on the page. So I've got all of these names and timestamps are balancing each other out on this horizontal line. And then all of my names are on this hard edge across here. So I'm aligning things, use of negative space, and there's also some variety in this screen here. So all of those things kind of coming together, balanced with the size of the avatar, balanced with the little icons that are kind of indicative of what that message is. All of these work together to create that balance and harmony when you're combining all these text elements. Okay, so for your homework on this combining text with other elements, I want you to create a mobile view of some kind of product. It doesn't matter what it is. In my example, I'm using Nike shoes, but I want you to create a grid of like 6 to 8 products. So you have 2 products side by side, some kind of title, and I want you to have an image of the product, a title of the product, the category of the product, number of options like color. Are there 3 options? Are there 3 colors? Something like that. And then also the price. So image with all of that. And, make sure that you're trying to balance the title with the price, and you're paying attention to the space in between the product grid. Pay close attention to all of the spacing and all of that to create this balance while you're combining all of the text. So that'll be the first screen. On your second screen, I want you to show one of those products from the first screen as a product detail. And I'm intentionally making it a mobile screen just so it's not so much to design. And you can look at the examples below. It doesn't have to be like an entire tech specs, features, all this warranty, everything. Just basically the title, at least one large image for the product detail screen. You can do a gallery if you want. It's totally up to you. Put in the category, bring in a short description of the product, an option to select size or color or whatever makes sense for the product that you're using, and also like an add to cart CTA. You can, again, see the Nike example, but create something of your own with your own products. And if you're having a hard time deciding, try to recreate this Nike one pixel by pixel. But if you want to branch out a little bit, go for something else that isn't done yet. And just we're focusing on creating text elements that are going to balance each other out. So variety, negative space, horizontal baseline alignment, and then vertical left edge text alignment. So get to work on this, post your work, let us give you some feedback on it, and can't wait to see what you come up with.